Good evening and welcome to the Townsend Open Space and Recreation Plan Update Public Forum and presentation of the draft plan. Tonight is June 22nd, 2023, and I am Jeff LeGros with the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. We are assisting the town with the update of the plan. The last time the plan was updated was in 2013. I have a presentation here of the draft plan, some survey results, and a map as well to show later in the presentation. And we will also have a period of time at the end for any questions and comments from the public. With that, I'll get into my presentation. I should note that there's a public comment period associated with the plan, and that comment period began a week ago on June 15th, and it will be extended 1 week after this presentation until June 30th. The digital copy of the plan can be found at the Townsend website under the Land Use Department in the left-hand column under Open Space and Recreation Plan Update. A paper copy of the plan is also available in the land use office, and any comments should be submitted in writing to the email address shown here on the screen. Jessica Consalvo, the conservation agent here in the land use department for the town of Townsend. And they can also be sent by mail. Attention conservation agent, town of Townsend, land use office, 272 Main Street, second floor, Townsend, Mass. 01469. I begin tonight's presentation with a land acknowledgement that was put together by the former land use coordinator here in Townsend, Michael Crowley. And Mr. Crowley consulted with local tribes, Native American people, to come up with an acknowledgement of land, basically acknowledging the fact that prior to European colonization and settlement of this area, this area was inhabited and settled for hundreds, if not thousands of years previously by Native people. I will read the acknowledgement word for word because it's important, and this will be inserted into the front piece of the plan. It begins, land is essential to human understanding of our personal and collective identities, to our health and well-being, and to our very survival as a species on this planet. The lands and waters of Townsend have long served as a site of meeting and exchange among indigenous peoples for thousands of years. We acknowledge that this area is within the traditional homelands of many forcibly removed indigenous peoples, including the Nipmuc and Abenaki peoples, whose descendants continue to live and work in these lands to this very day. With this land acknowledgement, we recognize the suffering inherent in the separation of a people from their homeland, and that this history still affects those descendants who continue to work and live in these lands today. Townsend strives to steward and respect the lands and waters in our community, both for the legacy of those generations who came before us and for the generations who will come after us. First part of my presentation tonight is a public info session and a presentation of the draft plan. I'll go through each section and give a little bit of a description of what's included within each section and why that particular information is important in an open space and recreation plan. But first, what is open space? Open space is primarily undeveloped lands owned privately or publicly that may in many circumstances contain public access. Many open spaces can be considered green space, lands that are partially or completely covered with grass, trees, shrubs, or other vegetation. They can contain active or passive recreational areas. And on the screen, you see many examples of open space. And as you can see, they vary from basketball courts to water bodies, from natural spaces to baseball fields, from ice skating rinks to rail trails, forested properties to meadows, nature trails to soccer fields, bike paths, and so on and so forth. Really, open space encompasses a lot of things that are used in a lot of different ways and are important to the well-being of a community. both its natural, recreational, and social well-being. Here on the screen, we have an overview or an outline of the contents of the plan. The first section is a plan summary. The second, an introduction. The third is a community setting or profile. The fourth, environmental inventory and analysis. Then an inventory of the lands. Then community vision, community needs, community goals and objectives, 7-year action plan, public comments, and references. All of these components are what are necessary to pull together the information that encompasses an open space and recreation plan, identifies the community's vision and their needs for meeting those open space goals. So section 1 is a general plan summary. To summarize the plan, it touches on all of those different sections. It's basically an executive summary. But what I've included here in the plan summary just sums it up with some strategies for how the open space plan and recreation plan, how this open space and recreation plan can or will or should be implemented here in the town of Townsend. So the main objective is protecting watersheds to maintain water quality of surface waters and subsurface waters. Protecting wildlife habitat, especially those that are currently underrepresented or sensitive, such as open fields, unique plant communities, priority or estimated habitats of rare and endangered species, biomap core habitat, and critical natural landscapes, and areas of ecological integrity. The next one is to improve access to protected public lands and to communicate opportunities for passive recreation to the public. After that, improving access, awareness, and condition of our 3 historic districts. Then continuing to provide and improve links specifically for pedestrian and bicycle trails and pathways, but also for open space habitat corridors and greenways through either strategic purchases of land or otherwise making connections, whether they be trail easements or other means of doing so. Number 6 is to improve the quality, quantity, and diversity of recreational facilities, opportunities, and programs. Number 7 is provide for improved maintenance of protected municipal open space lands, including parks, playgrounds, and recreational areas. In Townsend, there are 8 particular categories that have shown to be important to the community. These were highlighted by the results of the public survey that was given. Those categories are active recreation lands, amenities, parks and playgrounds, agricultural lands, ecologically sensitive areas, forest lands and passive recreation areas, scenic vistas and unique rural landscapes, or otherwise culturally or historically important resources, the Squanicook River, water bodies in general, wetlands, ponds, rivers, and streams, and finally, wellhead protection areas and groundwater aquifers. The table shown on the screen shows how each one of those categories of open space is represented within the plan. Where there's an X and a highlighted box, you'll see that the category across the top columns is represented within the vision or goal shown in the rows on the left. As you can see from the matrix, there's a pretty good representation of each of those categories within the goals and within the visions and goals of this plan. So ultimately, the things that are important to the community have been represented within the plan. The next section is an introduction. The main part of the introduction gives a statement of purpose. Why is open space and recreation planning important? And what does the town intend to do with the plan? What is the main purpose of the plan for the town of Townsend? An open space and recreation plan and its inventory of lands, identification of community needs, and recommended open space and recreation actions provides a tool to help guide sound municipal decision-making and to help maintain a balanced, well-informed approach to land use decision-making, resulting in appropriately sited development and considerable amounts of environnomic, value-based, protected open space lands capable of conserving and provisioning important natural resources now and into the future. This is summarized best by the Community Choices Report published by the Trust for Public Land in 1999, where they say the protection of open space not only protects the environment and natural resources, but it may also improve the local economy. Given the current social, environmental, and economic challenges facing our communities in the world we live in, this realization is more important now than ever. And I'd like to just note here and remind everybody that that was written in 1999. A lot has changed since 1999, and most recently, we've been through the COVID-19 pandemic. And during that time, we really saw how important public open spaces were to people and to their mental health and just general overall well-being, and how they recreate in ways where they can get out and do things. And when times may be difficult, there's a way to congregate. And so this was said in 1999. It is probably even more poignant now than it was then when it was written. And since then, the quote says that that it may improve the local economy. But since then, there have been many studies done that have actually shown financial or fiscal inputs to the local and regional economies from open space with data to support it. So I would say that it does and will improve the local economy. Also within section 2, it's important to note not only the purpose, but who the people are that help contribute to this plan and work hard day to day, volunteering their time on the Open Space and Recreation Committee. The list of names is here. I'll just mention the chairperson, Carol Hofsys, and several other people on the committee. And the committee is supported by staff within the Land Use Department, formerly Mike Crowley. At the current time, Beth Faxon is lending her support and has been monumental to the recent progress of the plan. With that, I move into section 3. Section 3 is a community profile where you summarize the history of the town. You summarize its soil conditions, its geology, its geography, all of these things, regional context. All of these things come together to form what's known as a community profile. Section 4 is an environmental inventory and analysis. Things like outstanding water resources, drinking water supplies, the Squanicook River area of environmental concern, critical environmental concern, things like historical resources, the Spalding Grist Mill, the cooperage, the building that I'm in currently here, Memorial Hall. All of these things are part of the environmental inventory and analysis. And basically you're looking to establish what the current condition is of those resources and what any potential environmental challenges might be, or any threats to those resources, potential threats to the historic district or scenic resources or fisheries and wildlife. So it's a robust section of the report. It encompasses a lot of information. But in my opinion, it's also one of the most interesting because it's not necessarily fully data driven. It's also story driven. You're telling the story of the land, the story of its people, the overall story of the community, its history, and its resources. And within that, you have some data and some information to analyze the environmental conditions. But section 4 and section 3 really combine to tell the story, the overall story of the community. This is just an example of some rare and endangered species within the region, many of which are present here in Townsend, in particular Blanding's turtles and wood turtle. Habitat for those species is important. Unique and scenic landscapes are another thing, and different wildlife habitats that are documented within Section 4. Things like open fields, prime agricultural lands, mixed woodlands, prime forest lands, shrubland and powerline corridors, which actually are a very important habitat. Cold water streams, of which Townsend has many, being the headwaters of the Squannacook River. Cold water fish resource areas are present here in Townsend, and Townsend is an important part of the region with the Squannacook River and its cold water fish resource areas, its cold water streams. Bogs, marshes, swamps, wet meadows, and most specific and perhaps important here in Townsend, the Squannacook River. It's an important natural resource, but also an extremely important recreational resource. We now move to Section 5, which is an inventory of open space lands, public lands, state and municipal lands, for example, of which Townsend has many state lands, Townsend State Forest, DCR lands, wildlife management areas, the Squannacook Wildlife Management Area, managed by the Department of Fish and Game. So you have DCR, state parks, state forest, you have wildlife management areas, which are fish and game lands. So you have a large amount of state land. You also have conservation properties owned by and under the custody of the Conservation Commission with the town. You also have nonprofit land trust lands. North County Land Trust owns several lands now, which were recently conveyed from the local Townsend Conservation Trust. You have private lands, which are Chapter 61 lands, a tax incentive program, privately owned lands that are not permanently protected, but are kept and maintained and utilized as open space lands by the private landowners. So they enroll in a Chapter 61 program for either agricultural land, forest land, or recreation land greater than 5 acres in size that's kept and maintained and used as open space. There are several Chapter 61 lands throughout town. We also have conservation restrictions or easements, which are privately owned lands that place a permanent protection on the land for conservation purposes. In addition to that, this section covers lands of interest for open space, recreation, conservation, natural resources protection, wildlife habitat, greenway corridors, etc. And it aims to identify lands that can serve the needs of the community or for future needs such as recreation or the development of recreational facilities or the protection of resources like drinking water supply or the protection of important habitat for wildlife. For more on the different lands within Townsend, again, on the Land Use Department's webpage, Michael Crowley produced a presentation and summarizing all of the land in Townsend and the different types of ownership for open space land. In 2022, the presentation is called The State of the Land, a land use and overview for Townsend. And the link is here on your screen. It will be made available when the presentation is uploaded as well. It can be found again on the land use webpage, and it's worth taking a look at if you're interested in learning about the land here in Townsend and how it's used and its current statuses. With that, I move into Section 6 of the plan, which is a community vision. This is where public input from the Open Space and Recreation Committee and input from stakeholders and really the greater community and region is so important. A public survey was produced early on in the process a year ago that gathered information from the public. It asked a series of open space related questions to gather information to really get at what the community needs are, but in general to identify what the overall vision is of the community and where they see open space as being relevant and important in the community, and the strategies and goals that they think, the broad scale strategies and goals that they think are important for maintaining, protecting, and enjoying open space within the community. There were 8 visions that were identified, and these are, again, broad scale goals: maintaining high quality drinking water, protecting the Squanicook River as a natural and recreational resource, protecting and maintaining surface water and wetlands, protecting additional lands for recreation habitat and water supply protection, retaining the natural character and cultural heritage of the town, promoting increased access to and awareness of public open space lands, developing and improving recreational facilities and amenities, and finally, improving linkages between recreational open space, neighborhoods, and commercial areas. The importance, again, in making connections. So to achieve the overall visions, the specific needs of the community regarding open space and recreation were assessed. This was done in section 7, the following section I'm going to discuss. Those needs were considered in the development of goals and objectives, which were and will be shown here in section 8, following the couple of slides now. And then finally, all of those things combined to develop recommended actions to implement the needs of the community and to accomplish the goals and objectives identified in section 7 and 8. So with that, section 7 consists of 3 parts: a summary of resource protection needs, a summary of community needs, and a summary of management needs. The first had 3 main needs that were identified. Again, protecting quality drinking water, perhaps one of the most important things in any town, protecting drinking water. And it's no surprise that this comes up again and again in each one of the sections of the report as a top priority. Number 2, protection, enhancement, and improved maintenance of our surface waters. The third, promotion of wildlife habitat underrepresented in the town and the linkages of those habitats into greenway networks, providing connections from one habitat to another. I move into the summary of community needs now. Improving access to recreational lands came up as a high need in the previous plan and in the current update. Enhancement of the town's 3 historic districts. While it's always been important to Townsend, it's perhaps now more important than ever as the town looks to see how they can develop those ways and those areas in a way that preserves their historical integrity, while also making them more accessible to the public, more useful, more informational, more educational, and just in general, more functional and usable areas. But again, most importantly, doing so while still preserving the historic interests and resources of those areas. The third, improving pedestrian and bicycle mobility throughout the town into public gathering places, especially schools. Much work has been done on this since the last plan, and now it's still important and identified as a need to continue on with those and to finish out some of those very important accomplishments that have happened since the last plan, with things like the Squanicook River Rail Trail and the Shared Street and Spaces grant, with the signage and connections and bike lanes and painted pavement markings and signs and all of those things that have improved pedestrian and bicycle safety and mobility. So again, it's accomplishments have been made, and it's still an important need to continue those. The next one is new neighborhood recreation facilities in underserved areas of town, providing opportunities for recreation in areas that may not have access to such resources now. That you'll see on the next slide, that's in line with a statewide goal in their comprehensive outdoor recreation plan as well. The next one, improving the quality of recreation facilities for field sports. That's important here as it is anywhere. And finally, under community needs, a community center or a multi-purpose park and recreation center where the community can gather and where activities can occur, not just organized team sports, but any outdoor open space activity, any use for a field and open space, things like kite flying and any other type of gathering in a public area, tossing a frisbee around, you name it, an area where the community can congregate and have access to quality recreational opportunities. Finally, I move into the summary of management needs. These are the things that are needed from a management perspective, whether it be the town or the state on some of the state-owned properties. And the first among those is a review of the town rules, regulations, and bylaws. The next one is a maintenance and improvement plan for town fields, grounds, and playgrounds. And a further step that the hope is by identifying this need, that maintenance and improvement plan can then be implemented to better care for the open space and recreation lands associated with fields, public grounds, parks, and playgrounds. And then finally, the need for a town volunteer stewardship coordinator and a grant writer to ensure that the goals of this open space and recreation plan are met. And we understand that that's something that's requires a budget within the town to create new positions. But whether or not that happens, the need is real. And with that type of a position, a volunteer stewardship coordinator, it's believed that a lot more could get done in that regard. And a grant writer has already been put into the budget for the town and a position created, but we maintain this need on this list to express that it's so important for any town to accomplish its goals, to get grants to do that. And so that position is important, and the need to maintain and continue that position and even increase training in grant writing among other town staff is important. So that remains a need, even though that position was created following the previous plan. So the plan overall aims to address the needs identified by the Open Space and Recreation Committee, but it also aims to be consistent with the 2017 statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, better known as the SCORE. To do so, the town plans to continue to improve access to open space and recreation for underserved populations. You saw a need earlier for that specifically. That's a need that was identified in the SCORE as well. So it's consistent. Also, to support statewide trail initiatives through local improvements, something that the town has been doing steadily with the Squanicook River Rail Trail and other trail work that's happened. But it's important to continue that work, and we note it here. Also, increasing availability of water-based recreation. The Squanicook River is an important water-based recreational resource, and this plan acknowledges the importance of that resource and also encourages improvements for access and opportunities and programming related to water-based recreation. Again, something that's consistent with the statewide SCORE. And finally, to support the creation and renovation of neighborhood parks, playgrounds, and recreational opportunities. So you can see, again, that was mentioned in the community needs. It's also a need identified in the most recent SCORE. So the community's needs are highly consistent with statewide needs and initiatives, which is a good thing because that should help in the future for getting grants to accomplish and achieve statewide the town needs, because they're consistent with statewide needs. With that, I move into section 8, the goals and objectives. We took a close look at the needs and the previous goals and the goals and objectives from the previous plan, and the committee worked to update the goals and objectives. And we have a set here of several A through L goals that were identified. I'll read off a couple, but I'm not going to go through the entire list of them. But first and foremost, maintaining high quality drinking water, ensuring continued quality and as well as usage of the Squanicook River and its tributaries, protecting all surface waters, again, historical character, access to town-owned lands, maintenance of recreation facilities, habitat connectivity, so on and so forth. Public Communication and public outreach was also expressed as something that's important and is represented in the goal here. Generating revenue and grants, protecting and enhancing suburban forest canopy and street shade trees, pursuing opportunities and protection for an acquisition of farmlands, and supporting and promoting agricultural activities and agricultural resources, and finally enhancing community climate resiliency. The community vision and the community goals and objectives come together to form a 7-year action plan. Perhaps the most important part of this open space and recreation plan. What are the needs? What are the goals? How are we going to get there? And that's the action plan. So section 9 is an action plan, and there are several actions listed, but all of those are informed from the visions, the goals and objectives, and the community needs that were established with public input. And the Open Space and Recreation Committee, public input, all come together to identify appropriate actions to strategically accomplish those goals. I just touched on this, but section 10 of the plan is a place for public comment and public input to be documented. And again, the entire process is a public planning process informed primarily by the public survey results and then by input from engaged stakeholders and the public meetings that were held, and the Open Space and Recreation Committee, which is a diverse body, that you saw in the slide for section 2, representing several different town committees and departments. And so all of those things come together to form a plan that's, we hope, community supported, publicly participated, public input, publicly developed, and representative of the community and the community's desires. So ultimately, one that has community support. Sorry, I'm going to jump back to the slide. I do encourage anybody listening, anybody on today, or anybody listening to the recording, to submit any comments they might have before June 30th so that they can be incorporated into the final draft of this plan, and to get involved and stay involved over time with the implementation of this plan. Get out and use your public open space. Let the community know if there are things that might be needed. Let the town know through the land use department. Really, if you have any input for this plan, provide it in writing by the 30th of June. But consider getting involved in the development of the next plan 7 years from now. And if there's ever open space on the open space committee, if there's ever a vacant membership slot on the Open Space and Recreation Committee, which now there may currently be one, consider getting involved, participating in the process, and helping to protect, preserve, and promote your town's open space. So finally, section 11 is the references, finalizing the plan, pulling all of the information together, and just demonstrating what references were used for documentation's sake, but also so that anyone reading the plan can follow up and pursue those references and learn more about open space and the things that inform it. Just the vision here of working backwards. A presentation today, so much went into it. With all of the different input on the survey, people that use open space lands, that comment on it, the different programs and recreation programs and activities that are here in town that were thought about and considered, and that provided input, or that we sought input from. Again, if there are any. If there's any additional input related to recreation, please send it along. And then finally, cooperative community plan. So with that, I'm going to move into my The next, part of the, presentation here, public input. If there are any questions or comments, I'll take any from the room first, if there are any. And then, if anybody who is on the presentation, has any, feel free to, unmute and, one at a time, or put something in the chat. Or again, send them to the link here, in writing, by email or by mail. So I'll leave the screen up. That ends my presentation, but I'll leave the screen up. If anybody wants to, to follow that link, for to download the digital copy of the plan. Are there any questions here at Memorial Hall?
Not a question, but thank you to the committee and all the people who did all this work. It's been a body of work. Now I have to go home and read it.
Please do, and we hope you enjoy it. Yeah, and on behalf of the committee, since I'm the one sitting up here, I'll lend my thanks as well, and my congratulations on a lot of hard work and a job well done. Yeah, I'll second that. They've done a good job. So thanks to the committee for all your work. Any? Now I think I'll stop sharing my screen, and we'll just kind of get back into the main screen, I think, here, and see if there are any chat questions or comments from any of the guests online. Well, it looks like we have 4 participants, and if anybody has any questions or comments or any input information they'd like to share, you're welcome to unmute if you have access to do that, and feel free to share. Okay, I'm not hearing any or seeing any. So again, I do encourage everyone to go on and to download the draft of the plan between now and June 30th. Provide any comments that you might have. Send them along as you have them to Jay Consalvo, the town's conservation agent, and she'll forward them along to the committee and MRPC, and we'll make sure that they are incorporated into the plan as appropriate. Whether you have questions, comments, or input, or just any general information or thoughts on the plan, feel free to send that information along. And I hope that everyone that does read it finds some value and some interest in the plan. And I thank the committee for their hard work and for having MRPC involved in the update of their plan. All of our communities are special and important to us. But when it comes to writing an open space and recreation plan, I've found Townsend to be a town that has a lot to offer. So it was really exciting, interesting, and rewarding working on this plan, from my perspective as a planner at MRPC. With that, I thank everybody for joining us. The information, again, the plan, as well as maps, are available for download through the land use webpage. Please feel free to look at and review them, and send along any comments you have. Otherwise, it's a beautiful evening, and I hope that you can get outside and enjoy the weather this summer. And thank you very much. Good night.